you can see new media art started in the very old history. In art conservation, one must distinguish between analog heritage and digital heritage. While we have had an analog heritage for thousands of years, the digital heritage is a recent development. Today, we find ourselves in a third phase in the conservation of culture. In the first analog phase, one sought to conserve real buildings and real landscapes, objects and subjects, a practice lasting thousands of years with greater or lesser success. In the second analog phase, a decisive step was taken. One sought to conserve landscapes, cities, and peoples in pictures, sculptures, and models. Writings and text on such landscapes, cities, peoples, and events also had this function. And in this way, books and literature were produced, as well as archives containing documents and manuscripts. Films and tapes were added much later, thousands of years later. One adapted to conserve real landscapes, cities, peoples, and events by storing them on other media. So they were already transformed from the real object to an abstract object, like oil on canvas or printed letters on paper. All these media and techniques of saving have now accumulated to a gigantic analog heritage. However, in the last 1,000 years, only 10% of the analog heritage has been maintained. This is not that much when compared with the great efforts of conservation, things, and artifacts. Clearly, conservation is also connected with an enormous Darwinist pressure of cultural selection and with cultural oblivion. 90% of the artworks of the last 1,000 years disappeared, and only 10%, I think 7%, they survived and were handed over to the next generation. In our discussion, we should go back further into human history to the earliest periods of high culture, to the ancient Egypts. Here, one clearly observes the invention and system of storage technology. Here, the conservation of buildings or landscapes was not only the priority, but the conservation of human beings. Naturally, not all people were conserved. One only undertook such an enormous effort of conservation for a special subject, for the pharaoh. Only a very few others were treated in this manner, namely the family of the pharaoh and some high priests. So one could say that the mummy was the first medium of conservation, the first cultural memory that is passed to the successive generation. And they were successful, aren't they? In some senses, the mummy was the first hard disk of the past, the first generation of storage technology. The overcoming of death is the origin of culture. This is because culture is a memory space, a storage space whereby, is a memory space, a storage space whereby that which has in reality already died continues to survive symbolically. It's not the pharaoh that survives, it's a symbol of the pharaoh. However, in the pyramids, it is not the mass of the Egyptian peoples which one finds, but only a selection. From the start, therefore, selection is a criterion of culture. Not the collective self, but an elite was conserved for the collective memory. The fact that in today's internet age, collective articulations may also be stored is something fundamental new. So I jumped into the contemporary time, sorry. For thousands of years, traditions and conservation of cultural memory were not media of the masses, but media of the elite, of the happy few. Today, due to the rapid developments in the technical means of storage and digitization, it has now become possible for the first time to accomplish the paradigm shift from storage medium of the elite to storage medium of the masses. To better understand the principle of storage technology, I would like to once again look back in the past. One of the very first model of storage technology is the Noah's Ark principle. But there is one strange detail about this story. I hope you all know it. Although the Ark was enormous, not everything was stored, and not everybody was saved, but only a few, a couple of each animal and a couple of the human beings. Noah's Ark does not appear to be a principle of survival, but the principle of selection, something which is not really a democratic principle. And I show you contemporary or a modern example of the Noah's Ark. It's from Nam June Paik. It's from the collection of ZKM. Museums are floating crates like Noah's Ark. They are meant to collect and store artworks in their bellies. They are support systems protecting from the disappearance of artworks, and that artworks are conserved, preserved, and restored. But unfortunately, they function precisely like Noah's Ark, by selecting and saving only the few works, the presumed masterpieces like the Nico of Samothrake or Mona Lisa. And they can't conserve all the artworks which are done by human beings. It is in this example of Noah's Ark that we recognized the constant problem of limited storage and limited storage space. As we have learned from the Egyptians, the second constant in storage technology results from the cult of the dead. Storage technology works, therefore, against death, against disappearance. Consequently, a storage medium is a medium of immortality. Over time, storage media have changed with increasing rapidity, and yet the desire for immortality connected with it has remained. At first, one conserved the object or subject itself. That was the example of the mummy. Then one transferred the storage, the handing down of information to other media, for example, printing, painting, or stone. The current storage technologies now make possible the conservation of previously unknown dimensions. Not only are bodies conserved, but an entire life. At the age of 4 years, for instance, the universal genius of Buckminster Fuller began collecting all his sketches and documents. He must be crazy up to his very young years. He referred to this collection as chronophiles. When he died at the age of 88, he left behind over 200,000 documents. Since then, these chronophiles have been housed at the Stanford University Library in the United States. So the whole collections of his whole life now is found in a university library. They amount to 120 volumes and 60 and 25 card indexes, each ordered into 500 pages with a total weight of 45 tons. This is a kind of mummification of the personal memory of Buckminster Fuller. And it's a product of a lifelong self-observation and self-documentation and a kind of self-conservation. It represents an enormous effort of immortalization, not to be forgotten, but to be remembered. Today, this archive of chronophiles take up the space of a tiny memory stick. or it could have that space of a teeny memory stick, not longer weighing 45 tons, but only 20 grams. And yet Buckminster Fuller did not wish to survive materially. He wished to survive immaterially and symbolically. He therefore accomplished the transition from analog conservation of body, for example, to digital conservation. And this digital conservation has to do with the avoidance of symbolic death. The French philosopher Jacques Lacan observed that we are threatened by two deaths. The first, physical death, and the second, symbolic death. We also know from James Bond film that you only live twice, and in German translation it means you only die twice, which is closer to the Lacan's theory. And the second death is the worst of the two deaths. Here, memory is erased. For this reason, there is a great effort to at least survive symbolically, and thus the culture of memory in the digital age has shifted from the field of operation into the field of symbolic operation, into the field of the code, the symbol, the hypertext, and the databases. And the databases are interestingly also called memory banks. With the digitization of memory symbols, their dissemination has also become easier. In the past, the memory symbols, the murals, and the statues were not yet mobile. A single illustration existed for one subject or object. And the stores were cellars or catacombs in the earth or gigantic tombs like the pyramids. Bodies and goods would keep safe in them. However, the inclination towards mobile storage showed itself early on, such as in Noah's Ark or in the Ark of the Covenant of the Israel people. Information was contained within them and migrated from one location and from one period to another. That was the change of the conservation of object, of hardware, to the conservation of information, of software. Thus, the Word of God, that was the first media indeed, then the 10 Commandments, are fixed on stone tablets. The migration into the Ark of the Covenant with the Israeli people when they refuged from Egypt. So that was the starting point of mobile storage, even if it's analog. Present-day memory storage banks are mobile and displaced and networked through cloud computing. So storage has also ascended from the pharaoh's tomb into virtual clouds. This metaphor gives an indication of the enormous mobility of the new storage mediums. And before the clouds dissolved, they saved information must find a new storage. In the age of cloud computing, cloud storage is the future. And of course, we were so interested in clouds and cloud storage and cloud computing. The Institute of Visual Media created an installation, a panoramic one. It's called cloud browsing, where you can have access to the worldwide data banks of information. And it creates networks between Wikipedia and archives, so you can search very how to call without a logical strategy. You can find information about artists, art historians, pictures, and you are led to scientific results and all the information you can find in the internet. As symbols of immortality, memory symbols were also expression of power. So as to expand one's influence both temporarily or territorially, coins were disseminated en masse as the first mobile memory symbols embossed with the portraits of the powerful. In this way, power was multiplied and made visible up to territorial boundaries. Independent of time and space, the powerful thus became omnipresent. The value of the person in question would be increased with the number of coins. That's a very easy way to be powerful and omnipresent. The objective was simple. The more people remembered one single person, so the less was it possible for this person to be forgotten. Therefore, a mass storage medium can also reach the masses, and so avoid the disappearance of a person, of an object or an event. The mass media increased this effect in popular culture during the 20th century enormously. After the sale of millions of records, Elvis Presley claimed triumphantly, 20 million people can't be wrong. And so this, the singer does indeed appear to have become unforgettable. The first clash with the new storage media for the masses came with the appearance of the photography. In the first place, it now became possible for everyone to have his portrait taken, and even better, he could make a portrait of himself. Everyone, therefore, became a legitimate subject, both as producer as well as recipient. In the second place, from the negative of a single picture, an infinite number of copies could be made. And there's a very popular installation in ZKM which makes this process visible. It's a flicker box, or it's a box of photography. You name it from the main stations, railway stations, and you can take a photo of yourself. And the photo is directly sent to a website, to monitors, and into the museum. So we like to show the audience that everyone is now valuable enough to be shown with his portrait in the museum, and in former times that was only exclusively possible for the very few, for the royals and for the mighty persons. In the digital world, with Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and other platforms, the self-produced memory symbols can be published themselves. So I stop it. I think you catch the crucial point. Through the mass media, the masses were also given the privilege of producing memory symbols by themselves and of storing and disseminating them via internet. Today, through the internet, this can occur almost in real time. Through photography, and later through the internet, the web too, and the social media, the storage media and storage space become democratized. Through the digital storage technologies, the Noah's Ark of analog tradition was transformed from a medium of exclusion, in which only a few were taken, into a medium of inclusion, in which everything and everyone could be recorded.